After a week of heavy shelling from Russian forces, an attempt to deliver aid to the besieged city of Mariupol has failed. But hundreds of residents in the city packed whatever possessions they could fit into their cars and drove away, heading north. Today, details of exactly what happened during the attack on the maternity unit have emerged. Elsewhere, the brutal war has continued. Cities across Ukraine are under heavy bombardment, with the country's second biggest city, Kharkiv, receiving particularly intense shelling overnight. Russia claims a Ukrainian missile killed 20 people in Donetsk, though the Ukrainian army blamed Russia. Mariupol is completely surrounded, causing hellish conditions for those civilians still trapped. Charities say many people have been left without food, water or medication. And a warning, my report contains distressing images from the start. From the air, Mariupol is a vision of hell. What was a city of nearly 500,000 people has been bombed relentlessly by the Russians. Filmed by Ukraine's Azov battalion, which includes former far-right militia, the very people Russia said it had come to destroy. On the ground, those left here have few places to hide. They cower in stairwells of buildings they once called home. They say more than 2,500 people have been killed in Mariupol so far. Families are being destroyed every day. The girl cries for her father, terrified he will not make it out. There are no new supplies coming in. No food, no water, no power. It is the definition of desperate.
Никакой информации, ничего не знаем. Живем как в каком-то дремучем лесу. Хоть бы что-то нам сказали, что, где, как происходит.
Свалил, вся власть свалила. Остались только какая-то полиция.
They cower too in one of the surviving maternity units. This is the city where Russia blew up a maternity hospital last week. The survivors were brought here. But Dr. Marin says one of the most badly injured women and her unborn child died on his operating table.
Той день, коли бомбанули роддом, до нас привезли трьох. Одна найтяжча була з розчавленням тазу і відривом правого стегна в шоці. Поки її реанімували, проводили протишокові мероприємства, ми зробили кесаревий розтин, дістали дитину без ознак життя. Протягом більше півгодини реанімація дитини не дала результатів, потім ще півгодини чи більше реанімація матері без результатів. Загинули обидва.
There is new life here too.
Давай, ножки. Давай, подожди, сейчас.
The tears of joy from a mother also injured in last week's hospital bombing. But within seconds of taking her first breaths, baby Alana is also hearing the sounds of killing. When these shocking images went around the world last week, Russia said Mariana, a well-known blogger and social media star, was faking it in staged photos. But here she is, with her baby Veronica.
Это произошло 9 числа в 3-й больнице Мариуполь. Мы лежали в палатах, у нас повылетали стекла, окна, рамы и все несущие стены. Мы не знаем, как это произошло. То есть мы сидели у себя в палатах, кто успел накрыться, кто не успел.
This afternoon, a local ceasefire negotiated for 2 hours allowed 160 cars full of civilians to escape Mariupol. At national level, the talks by video conference between Ukraine and Russia paused but will continue. President Zelensky updated an anxious world on their progress.
Вже почалась відеозустріч делегацій. Вона триває. Всі чекають новин ввечері. Ввечері обов'язково доповімо.
In the Russian-backed separatist city of Donetsk in eastern Ukraine, they blamed President Zelensky's army for a missile attack in which 20 people were reported killed. In this information war, the Ukrainians denied it, with some questioning the way missile fragments were seen on the ground. In Russia, despite new laws stifling truth, there remain ingenious people who dare to defy Putin. While some hold up blank pages, others brandish signs saying literally 2 words. Meanwhile, on Russian television, they have been discussing the return of public executions in Ukraine, comparing it to the hanging of Nazis in Kiev after the Second World War.
Hello, I live in Kharkiv in Salativka district, and my residential area is under fire from the first day.
Lilia Potapova sent us this message today from Kharkiv.
Can hear artillery, fighter planes and explosions during all the day.
The second city of Ukraine is just a few miles from the Russian border, and yet it is still under Ukrainian control. That too tells you something of how this war is going. Well, Ukraine's capital, Kiev, has seen some of the most intense fighting as Russian forces edge closer to the centre. Today, Ukraine's defence minister said a city that was once one of the most beautiful in Europe looks like something from an apocalypse movie. Heavy fighting has continued northeast and northwest of the capital as Russian forces try to encircle the city. It's forced evacuations from many of the surrounding small towns, including Irpin, Brovary and Vyshhorod. Kiev is still under bombardment. This morning, at least one person was killed in the Obolon area when a block of flats was hit by a Russian shell. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilsum, is in Kiev. Lindsay.
Krishnan, the centre where I am remains relatively quiet, but it's a completely different story in those places that you've just mentioned. Those apocalyptic scenes, they're in the suburbs. When you go there, you think, what on earth are the Russians targeting? The only thing they can be targeting are residential areas, because all you find there are blocks of flats and houses and shops and all the normal things of people's everyday lives. But at this point, with the relentless shelling that they're getting, life in those suburbs has just become intolerable. One shell and a block that had been home to hundreds became an inferno. At first light, the emergency services managed to rescue an elderly woman. Many residents have already left the northern Kyiv suburb of Obolon, but 2 people were killed in this attack and 12 injured. The blackened carcass now stands as testament to Russian attempts to drive away the residents of the capital. So small acts of defiance gain added resonance from a population that's exhausted and terrified, but not cowed. At Kyiv station, we met 2 families from the adjacent block. For them, last night's terror was the final straw.
Наш дом весь хитнуло, все окна балконные и квартирные все повыпадали. Наши стараются, молодцы. Держат, сопротивляются, но нам с детьми рисковать уже не стоит. Так что вот так. Да. И так, каждая ночь, каждый час, куда-то бежим, куда-то идем. Так уже 19 дней, ни сна, ни покоя, ни еды нормальной, ничего. В общем, вот так.
That must have been terrifying. So where will you go now, do you know?
Poland, maybe.
Poland, yeah.
Poland, because we are half dead here in Poland.
Yesterday, we drove towards Irpin, a satellite town of Kyiv that's been under attack. There were no other vehicles but the volunteer soldiers escorting us. While filming at the last checkpoint before Irpin, we heard the same terrifying sounds of artillery. This is what people who live here have to endure all the time, direct bombardment of residential areas. Right, ready? We're at the bridge leading into Irpin. There's been some incoming fire, not clear where exactly it's landed. And we just heard outgoing before that. We pulled back into the forest, accompanied by the soldiers from the checkpoint. You never know how long an artillery barrage will last. When it was over, we could see a house had been hit just beyond the bridge. It was unclear what further damage had been done. Throughout yesterday, people tried to leave Irpin in ones and twos, some too old or too sick to make it on their own. About 10,000 of the 70,000 people who lived here are believed to be still trapped inside.
На сьогоднішній день 70% нашого міста – це українська територія, і там українці, а з 30% там є російські загарбники. Але ми робимо все для того, щоб на 100% звільнити наше місто.
Back at the station, we meet more women who've had to leave their men behind, like Yulia and her baby from Chernihiv.
Every hour, and I try to stay there with my family, but yesterday I decided to come to Kyiv and then to go somewhere with my baby.
Families fleeing and soldiers preparing to go to war, a scene from the ages. And this family wheeling grandma. Their village, Peremoha, has been occupied by Russians for more than 2 weeks now.
Всі були з автоматами, нам не давали виходити нікуди. Нас не чіпали, тому що у нас було 8 людей в одній хаті і 2 маленьких діток. Одному 3 рочки хлопчику і дитині 8 років, 9. Тому нас майже не чіпали.
But some villagers who tried to flee 3 days ago were shot, they say, by Russian soldiers.
Не вся виживші були, але було багато поранених та загиблих. Не змогли їх навіть похоронити, багатьох тих, кого змогли хоча б забрати вже трупи, закопали просто в дворах та в парку.
In the forests around Kyiv, Ukrainian soldiers fire mortars at the encroaching Russians. Their struggle to protect civilians is getting more desperate by the day. There's been a lot of talk in the last week about how the Russian onslaught on the capital has been bogged down, how they haven't been able to just sweep in and take Kyiv. And that is true. But then, on the other hand, you have to look at what they have done. And they have destroyed all these suburbs around. What does that do? What's the tactic there? Well, the only thing I can think of is that they're trying to drive the people out. They're trying to terrorize people. And they're trying to clear a path for when they do actually try and come into the city. Now, that's not going to be easy. This is a modern city of flyovers and bridges and, you know, all these tall buildings, which are very good for snipers. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but there is a purpose to what they are doing. And it is really impossible now for people to stay in those suburbs. The Russians are occupying part of Irpin and that village which that family was from. That's a little bit further away. So obviously, once the Russians are in, people are just terrified because Russian soldiers are going around with their machine guns. They reportedly do sometimes take men prisoner, and the women and children just feel that they can't live there anymore. Yet when they do try and leave, sometimes they get shot at. So anybody who tries to leave is taking a chance. It's spreading absolute terror through here. Now, if there was, say, a ceasefire tomorrow, well, that would be great. It would be marvellous if people didn't get shot at anymore. But what would that actually do? It would give the Russians a chance to regroup, to take a break, to get more supplies in, to get more fuel in. If you freeze the conflict where it is and you don't pull the Russian soldiers out, people's lives here are impossible. And the government, it can't really run this country anymore.
Thanks, Lindsay, and brave work by you and your team. Well, here in Lviv, I've been speaking to David Bisley, the head of the World Food Programme, about the food crisis engulfing parts of Ukraine and the impact this will have on the world food supply. I began by asking him how far away people in Ukraine are from starving.
You know, it doesn't take but a week or two without food, you're going to be starving. And we've got people, in my opinion, that are already at the brink, already at the edge. We don't have time to waste. This is why we're trying to scale up so fast, make certain that we don't have any bureaucratic hurdles at all in our way, so we can minimize those obstacles to reach the people in the cities. And what can we do to set up systems in cities like bakeries, give them generators so they can at least get bread while we're trying to move food supplies in.
WFP hasn't had to do this in Europe for 30 years. I mean, how does that feel to be right here, right now?
It's not good. It's heartbreaking. We shouldn't be here. Should not be here. We're in 80-something countries now. I'm billions of dollars short of what I need around the world. Yemen, Syria, Ethiopia, Afghanistan, the Sahel. I'm cutting rations 50% in places of grave need now. I'm cutting...
So you're cutting supplies to poorer countries in order to get food to Ukraine?
I'm cutting before Ukraine, I was already cutting food rations 50% to millions of people in starving countries. Yemen, for example.
What, because you just don't have the resources?
We don't have the resources. Because we had a perfect storm before the Ukrainian war. COVID, conflict, climate. Economic ripple effect, the number of people that went from the brink of starvation went from 135 million to 276 million. Before Ukraine. So we're billions of dollars short before Ukraine, and now you've taken the breadbasket of the world and shutting it down. It's not just going to hurt the people in Ukraine. You think the Arab Spring was a problem. The conditions are much worse than that which was right before the Arab Spring in 2012 for many countries around the world. Fuel costs are spiking. Food costs are spiking, shipping costs are spiking. Our operations alone are taking a $750 to $1 billion hit because of disruption of supply.
Okay, so what's the bill? What's the cost you need right now?
I need $600 million just in Ukraine for 3 months, and I'm already $1 billion short. Where's it going to come from? Are you going to take the children in Ethiopia and starve them to feed the children in Ukraine? You go take it from Afghan children to feed the children in Yemen? I mean, you're asking me to choose which children live, which children die. That's $430 trillion worth of wealth around the world today. No child should die from starvation, not one.
David Bisley, thank you very much.
Thank you.